Discover the amazing, hidden truth about dragons. 7 incredible myths revealed that transform Eve. Eve wiped her brow as she pushed back the heavy attic door, its creaking hinges echoing the weariness of her long day. Dust swirled in the dim light, creating an ethereal haze where memories lay still. With 2 jobs to juggle, she often felt like a ghost drifting through life, invisible to the bustling world around her. The town's diner was a whirlwind of orders and chatter, while her retail job demanded a smile that felt increasingly plastic. Both places engulfed her, leaving little room for who she truly was. But tonight, the attic called to her, a refuge from the constant grind. As she rummaged through forgotten possessions, her fingers brushed against something that felt unique. She pulled a worn journal from the pile. Intrigued, she flipped it open, finding half-faded stories of dragons soaring through blue skies, defending wisdom and courage for those who dared to dream. The myths spoke to her like a beacon of hope, revealing lessons lost in the mundane daily chaos. What if life wasn't simply struggle? What if she could embrace her hidden strengths and transform her narrative from invisible to indomitable? Emboldened by the rediscovered tales, Eve began weaving them into her own life. But every step forward caused the sting of doubt to seep in. At her retail job, she had pitched ideas infused with those fantastical lessons, but she'd been dismissed as just a waitress, her voice lost among the corporate giants who couldn't see past her apron. Each rejection clawed deep, reminding her of the lingering prejudice against the lowly working class. She felt herself recede, the thorns of condescension digging into her resolve. Where did the brave knights of her grandfather's stories fit into this suffocating world? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Eve met an unexpected ally, a retired professor named George. His disheveled gray hair and warm gaze sparked something buried deep within her. He spoke of the ancient tales, not as fables but guiding truths. Through him, she explored connections between the battles of yore and her current struggles. But just when she began to see a pathway forward, a corporate meeting loomed before her like a dragon ready to incinerate her dreams. Would she betray the lessons of courage and fight, or name herself defeated once again under their derision? With her daughter Nora's unwavering belief nestled in her heart and George's wise encouragement ringing in her ears, the weight of a decision pressed heavily on her chest. The upcoming presentation smothered her excitement with a tightening grip. What if they laughed at her? What if she remained the ghost, unnoticed? Would the anxiety rip through her newfound hope, leaving her to drift among shadows? As she prepared for the meeting, she stood on the precipice of bravery, an almost tangible moment filled with possibility and terror. Would she seize her narrative, fiercely clutching it like a treasure against the tides that wanted to drown her? The air was thick, crackling with unspoken revelations, and a single thought surged forth: in a world of shadows, could she truly become the fierce protector of her own legacy, like the dragons of old? Eve stood at the kitchen table, scattered notes and sketches around her like dragon scales in a chaotic nest. Each piece represented a fragment of her thoughts, a strategy for the presentation she had to deliver the next day. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her aspirations pressing against her. How could she articulate the fire inside her in a way that would spark recognition, even in the cold, unyielding boardroom? After speaking with George, she had devoted hours to transforming her idea into a narrative that was not just an echo of dragons, but a reflection of her own journey. As she practiced in the mirror, her reflection stared back with a combination of determination and fear. Could she wield her voice as a weapon against indifference? The approval she sought was not only for her but to prove to herself that she was more than a mere facilitator of orders, she was a creator. In her rehearsal, she imagined success. The moment she would share her vision, her heart would roar like a dragon's breath. But beneath that excitement loomed the specter of self-doubt. What if they dismissed her again? Each past judgment echoed in her mind, mingling with the tales of tragedy she had read in the journal. where heroes had fought their own demons and emerged victorious. The momentum carried her forward, but was it enough to combat the impending dread? That night, the attic towered above her like a sentinel of dreams. She returned to the corner where she had discovered the journal, letting her fingers trace the spines of forgotten stories. Each had a lesson embedded deeper than mere words. It was about trust, courage, and resilience. These were the tenets she had to incorporate into her pitch. What if she could present these principles in a fresh light? The fantasy hadn't been mere entertainment, it was a blueprint for her reality. With newfound clarity, she began to draft her presentation. Each sentence flowed as if conjured from the swirling dust of the attic. Midnight candles flickered as she formed an outline infused with mythical allegories. She could demonstrate how embracing creativity would not only boost morale in the company but could also guide them toward innovative solutions akin to dragons navigating treacherous skies. By dawn, she felt a shift. Instead of fighting the tide of indifference, she would invite them to sail alongside her. She ached to present not only data but emotions, what had led her here, the struggles she faced, and how those battles had endowed her with a unique perspective. That narrative was equally as powerful as the strategies she could provide. When she crawled into bed for just a moment's rest, the exhaustion washed over her, but it was coupled with exhilaration. Perhaps for the first time, Eve felt like she was embracing her own dragon spirit. The fear of failure had been transformed into a motivator, igniting her will to succeed. Yet, as dreams lingered at the periphery of her sleep, a question crept forward: if she failed to convince them, what would happen to her story? Would she be left once more among the shadows, stripped of her newfound identity? The impending confrontation with her colleagues loomed large, and she could feel her heart quickening as it settled heavily in her chest. With the dawn's first light shimmering against her window, she realized the moment had arrived to face the corporate dragons. Would she soar or would she fall? Eve took a deep breath, readying herself not only to fight for her ideas but to fight for her very self. But as the clock ticked, uncertainty clawed back. Would her voice echo in the hall, or would it instantly dissipate into silence? Eve stood in front of the polished conference room door, her heart pounding like war drums. The sun filtered through the large glass windows, illuminating the sterile environment that felt increasingly claustrophobic. This was her arena, but rather than the feeling of invincibility she hoped for, the familiar tendrils of self-doubt curled around her resolve. Would her voice, crafted from late-night inspirations and raw emotional honesty, carry to those seated inside? She recalled the countless hours she poured into preparing this pitch, intertwining her personal story with the themes from the journal. The mythical elements danced around her mind, each one a reminder of the courage required to confront an audience that had frequently scrutinized her ideas. They prided themselves on their skepticism. How would they react when she asked them to lean into vulnerability instead? As she nodded to her colleagues filing in, Eve felt the weight of their gazes, a mix of expectation and skepticism. The boardroom, equipped with state-of-the-art technology, now felt like a dragon's den. She was reminded of the countless mythical tales where a lone hero faced insurmountable odds. Her mantra flashed through her head: this is your moment. She took a deep breath and stepped inside, forcing her footsteps to match her intention. Confident. The cold air of the room contrasted sharply with the fire smoldering inside her. The presentation started. Each voice that followed seemed to drain her energy, pulling her further down the well of anxiety. Each corporate jargon-filled slide eroded her sense of purpose, leaving her wondering once more if she was truly ready. When it was her turn, she strode to the front, the fear tightening in her chest but tempered by determination. She ignited the projector. The first slide illuminated her vision: embrace your inner dragon. The familiar rush of adrenaline coursed through her as she started speaking, weaving her narrative of creativity, vulnerability, and resilience. A spark flared within her. She envisioned transforming her colleagues' expressions, curiosity mixed with shades of disbelief, yet, their faces remained stoic, and for every captivating analogy using mythical creatures, she felt the walls closing in. The tension was not only in the air but woven into the fabric of their collective minds. Eve took a moment to gauge their reactions, and what she saw unnerved her: arms crossed, lips pursed, eyes narrowing. Had she simply wasted her breath, standing on the very precipice of rejection? Panic threatened to overshadow her presentation, but she pushed forward, sharing personal anecdotes that tied her motivations to the corporation's objectives. She spoke of the times her own creativity was stifled and how rebounding from that despair ignited an urgency in her to create change. Would they see the inversion of her struggle as proof of her capacity instead of an invitation to dismiss her? With each passing second, the tension hovered like a storm cloud, and then, as if a spell had been cast, she noticed subtle shifts. Some eyebrows raised, hands unclenched, and for a moment, she saw acknowledgement not from the entire room, but from a few key faces nodding in recounting empathy. Hope sprang forth. Perhaps chance alone wouldn't dictate the outcome. Perhaps she could kindle understanding in the hardest of hearts, but just as she felt momentum build, a hefty voice cut through the room, a skeptic she had faced before. "Eve, you make a compelling case for creativity. However, how do you plan to measure its success?" The formidable question hung like an anchor, threatening to drag her back into doubt. Would she falter under the pressure of a direct confrontation? With the foundation of her preparation within her, she knew she had one opportunity to confront this challenge. The moment of truth had arrived. She could either succumb to the tide of traditional expectations or summon the audacity ignited by her journey. Eve felt a rush of adrenaline as she locked eyes with the questioner. The fire in her heart flared again. This was not just a pitch, it was a battle for the very essence of her vision. Could she transform this moment of confrontation into a stepping stone toward validation? She took a breath, ready to respond with clarity and conviction, prepared to flip the narrative and become the hero of her own story. Eve steadied her breath, channeling an unexpected calm that surged through her. She needed a response that would not only satisfy the inquiry but also pivot the discussion into the territory she wanted to explore. The room was tense, eyes fixed on her, and she could sense the stakes rising. This was the moment, a chance to draw on her strengths, grounded in experience rather than theoretical frameworks. The success of creativity, she began, her voice unwavering, is as much about the journey as it is about metrics. Just as dragons symbolize transformation in many myths, so does creative success involve shifting perspectives and landings that go beyond traditional KPIs. It's about fostering an environment where innovation can flourish. Eve's words painted a vivid picture. She envisioned the dragons powerful, majestic beings capable of inciting fear and awe. The analogy fell onto her audience's ears, and she fueled the connection further. If we can accept a more holistic view, we can begin measuring impact through engagement, culture shifts, and emotional resonance rather than solely revenue at the bottom line. Creativity breeds a different kind of success. As her conviction seeped into the presentation, she began to see subtle changes unfold in the room. Initially skeptical faces transformed, curiosity lighting up their features. That energy bolstered her. She thought carefully about her next point, knowing that she had struck a chord. "Let me give you an example," Eve continued, her gestures animated, drawing in her viewers with each word. "Think back to when we implemented the last creative project. The initial skepticism was palpable, see, that's the dragon. But once the ideas were shared freely, like flames dancing into the night, we ignited something beautiful. Employee engagement skyrocketed, collaborations bloomed, and the results echoed well beyond the immediate deliverables." An excited murmur passed through the room, and Eve absorbed the renewed energy. Each nod fed into her own core resolve. This was validation of her deeper understanding, one previously shrouded in doubt. Each of her colleagues battled their own dragon's fear, hesitation, ambition. She felt it was not just her fight anymore, but theirs too, yet, a flicker of anxiety pierced through the growing clarity. What if the initial wave of support was fleeting? Against the backdrop of internal company politics, she couldn't forget the challenges lurking beyond the presentation. A smile emerged as she subtly redirected her focus, knowing she could not dwell on doubt but instead embrace the momentum generated. Furthermore, she pressed on, lowering her voice for emphasis, "Consider the times we've felt inspired, those moments when creativity rocks the boat, propelling us into the unknown." Each story she told intertwined with the essence of her pitch. She was not merely advocating for creativity, she was demanding an embrace of vulnerability, the bravery to ride the uncertain waves of innovation. As she spoke, Eve realized that this moment transcended her pitch, it became about awakening an entire culture. But just as she felt she was on the brink of transformation, the hefty voice interrupted again, this time echoing deceitful authority, "That sounds idealistic, but in practice it's messy. Can we afford to be that audacious?" The challenge stung, surfacing the deep-set fears she battled daily. Could she, dare she, use this skepticism as fuel for her argument? A rush of defiance compelled her forward, untangling a web of clarity from the tendrils of doubt. This was a tangible confrontation, not just about her ideas, but about defining her space within this organization. "I believe we need to be audacious," she asserted, meeting the skeptic's gaze with unyielding focus. "It's necessary. Change doesn't come from caution, it ignites from boldness." As discussions picked up again, the tone shifted. Enthusiasm and debate swirled, ideas battled rather than compliance emerged. This was no longer just a presentation, it was a transformation for everyone involved, but even as she absorbed the electrified atmosphere, a deeper realization loomed. Could she take this triumph further? Was she prepared to challenge the existing structures and cultivate a team culture that fully recognized creativity as potential? The budding support in the room ignited a new ambition deep within her, a desire to break free from mere advocacy and actively reshape her environment. Feeling this surge of determination, she understood the path ahead required more than a single pitch to provoke the dragons, it called for a crusade, and as she stood, reflecting on her newfound conviction, a thought struck her: what if dismantling the barriers to creativity was just the beginning? A new battle awaited, a confrontation with the very systems she hoped to influence. Eve's heart raced as she contemplated the road ahead. Would she find the courage to become not just a champion for creativity but a catalyst for profound change? As the air thickened with possibility and challenge alike, she could almost hear the whisper of the dragon, urging her to explore deeper waters yet uncharted. Eve left the conference room, a pulse of adrenaline fueling her steps as the post-presentation chatter echoed around her. The initial thrill of defending her ideas cascaded into a rush of uncertainty. While the room had remained engaged, the battle was far from over. Here was a glimpse into a transformative conversation, yet the deeper question lingered: how could she ensure that momentum converted into meaningful change? As she navigated the maze of cubicles, her mind churned with possibilities. The words of her skeptical colleague replayed repeatedly. Can we afford to be that audacious? The question burrowed into her thoughts, forcing her to confront her plans head-on. Was audacity too risky? Or was it essential for driving genuinely innovative work? Eve stopped by her desk, the clutter of papers scattered across it reflecting her current mental state. She'd have to strategize beyond just ideas and embrace the hard work of shifting mindsets. The brief respite allowed her to gather her thoughts, but urgency loomed large. She needed a plan. After an hour of flipping through various articles and tapping into her own reflections, she realized it wasn't enough to inspire in the moment. She needed to weave a consistent narrative that would endure beyond this initial burst of enthusiasm. She began drafting an outline for a workshop that could build on her presentation. The aim wasn't just to sell a concept but to create a shared language around creativity and innovation, making the dragons of fear and complacency less intimidating. As Eve sketched her ideas, she recalled previous moments in her career when she had faltered, when fear of failure inhibited her boldness. This time, though, her determination glimmered brighter. She'd learned from those stumbles, they had forged her resilience and left her curious about the edges of her capabilities. Her hidden talent for galvanizing people could be put to work, turning vague abstract concepts into tangible, actionable experiences. Despite her renewed focus, her thoughts spiraled to the potential pitfalls. Would her colleagues welcome an open dialogue about risk-taking, or would fear seep back into the ranks, shrouding her attempt in doubt? The internal politics of the company were complex, each department a fortress of tradition and caution. Yet, she reminded herself of the shared excitement she had felt moments before. The willingness to challenge the status quo was in the air. In the midst of this internal conflict, an exhilarating notion washed over her. What if she framed the upcoming workshop as a collaborative journey? Inviting her colleagues to co-create a culture of innovation would not only diminish her isolating fears but also amplify their collective accountability. She closed her eyes, envisioning the future sessions filled with the buzzing energy of collaborative brainstorming. The thought of igniting that kind of atmosphere kindled warmth within her, a stark contrast to the skepticism that often shadowed her endeavors. The challenge, however, required navigating her influential opponents carefully. Eve knew that if she wanted her ambitions to succeed, she had to address the fears that those within her organization held tightly. More importantly, she had to foster trust that transcended mere compliance. With her course of action somewhat sketched out, Eve felt invigorated. But there remained a pivotal detail, one that pulled at the threads of her confidence as she planned. How would she measure success? She couldn't afford to pigeonhole the workshop with traditional metrics. It needed to resonate deeply, reflecting the emotional and cultural changes she sought. Committing to the unknown was daunting. But within that uncertainty lay her greatest opportunity. She could either allow it to paralyze her or let it forge a new path. As she signed off on her initial goals for the workshop, Eve felt the dark tendrils of doubt begin to recede, replaced by sharper resolve. The moment transformed quickly, as a voice sliced through her thoughts. A notification ping signaled an email from HR. Her heart jumped at the mention of a team meeting being scheduled for the following week. It was her chance to present the workshop concept and glean ultimate approval to pursue her ambitions. As she prepared to leave her desk, Eve's thoughts intensified. This was another dragon to confront, one that combined the fear of rejection with the possibility of unchecked creativity. Would she stand firm against the impending scrutiny? The kindling excitement mixed with the undercurrent of anxiety as she realized the stakes. Feeling the weight of what lay ahead, she whispered to herself, the time had come to face the uncertainty. With renewed purpose, she headed towards the door, determined that this next encounter wouldn't be merely another meeting, but an essential step toward changing the dynamics of her workplace. How would her colleagues react to the ambitious vision she had drawn? Would they see the potential, or was her boldness destined to fade into the backdrop of corporate caution? The answers awaited her just beyond the threshold. As Eve stepped into the meeting room, her pulse quickened. The rectangular table bore the weight of knowledge and apprehension, encircled by faces that varied between curiosity and skepticism. This tableau reminded her of the dragon's lair. She had often imagined the space where she would confront the fears that had held her back for so long. The air thickened with tension as she reviewed her colleagues' expressions, each person a fortress unto themselves. Would they allow her bold vision to penetrate their well-established walls? She took a deep breath, grounded by the preparation she had undertaken. Yes, she had crafted her messaging and visual aids meticulously. But now it was time to pierce through to their emotions, not just their intellect. Thank you all for being here today, she began, her voice steady despite the whirlwind beneath her composure. She could feel the subtle shift in the atmosphere as her words hung in the air. I want to discuss how we can collectively enhance our creativity and transform our approaches to innovation. Eve launched into her vision of the workshop, each slide unfolding like an invitation to embark on a journey. She highlighted the importance of collaboration, discussing humanizing approaches to complex problems that everyone faced. The details flowed, painting a vivid picture of a workplace that embraced experimentation rather than shunned it. As she spoke, she caught a glimpse of Bill, the notoriously cautious head of the finance department, crossing his arms tightly. A familiar anxiety twisted within her. What if he dismissed her ideas outright? She steered her gaze away, reminding herself that she wasn't just presenting to him, she was engaging an entire congregation of future colleagues who might benefit from a culture of openness. Midway through her presentation, Eve introduced the idea of fail forward. The concept resonated through the room like a lightning strike. Every successful innovation, she said, has encountered failures. We need to redefine what failure means. It's a stepping stone not just to success, but to growth. Her words were charged with conviction, a call to arms against the dragons of fear. Yet even as she saw heads nodding, Eve sensed the air still held reservations. It wasn't enough to deliver a captivating presentation, she needed broader participation. Addressing this concern, she paused and asked an open-ended question: how might we redefine success together? An unexpected silence settled over the room, filled with the weight of contemplation. She felt her chest tighten, vulnerability washing over her. But then, to her surprise, Maria from HR spoke up. "I think we often cling to measures that don't really reflect what we want to achieve." Her voice softened the atmosphere, opening a door to dialogue. Eve's heart raced in resonance with the moment. This was the breakthrough she had been hoping for, an unraveling of the fortress walls. As others began to share thoughts and experiences, the conversation shifted from mere acceptance of Eve's ideas to their own creative contributions. Momentum danced around the room as colleagues shared their hesitations, proposals, and enthusiasm. Each voice lifted a layer of the fog surrounding risk-taking that had been so entrenched in the company culture. Eve could feel her own confidence swell. She wasn't just a speaker, she was fostering a collaborative exploration of possibilities, yet, amidst this flicker of potential, one dark shadow lingered. Bill had yet to say anything. The room finished buzzing with excitement, but that tension she felt earlier returned as she braced for his response. "Eve," he finally spoke, his voice cutting through the newfound energy like a knife. "This sounds grand, but can we truly afford the time and resources to embark on something so unpredictable?" The question hit her like a slap, reverberating through the room. Eve's mind raced as an array of responses clashed in her head. What if the workshop annexed the valuable time needed for daily tasks? What if failure led to real setbacks? Her fiery resolve faltered for just a moment, but then she recalled the spirited discussions, the possibilities bubbling just beneath the surface. "Bill," she replied, choosing each word with care, "what if we redefine what unpredictable means? Isn't the potential for transformation worth the initial discomfort? Our greatest successes emerge from stepping into the unknown." Collective eyes turned to Bill, waiting for his reaction. There was a tension at the table, a decisive moment dogged in uncertainty. As Eve held her breath, she realized this was more than just a quest for approval, this was a pivotal moment for her growth. Would she confidently embrace this vulnerability, or shrink back in the face of doubt? With that thought coursing through her, Eve felt an irresistible pull. The stakes had risen sharply, and she was on the precipice of a profound transformation. Could she rally her colleagues around this pivotal moment and guide them toward collective courage? Or was this just another confrontation with the dragons of fear and complacency that had stifled her ambitions? The air crackled with uncertainty, and the next move hung tantalizingly in the balance. The silence stretched thin, a fragile filament of tension that threatened to break. Bill's expression remained impassive, yet Eve could feel the weight of his scrutiny digging into her resolve. This moment was no longer just about the workshop, it was about challenging the status quo of an entire culture. As the silence settled, a flurry of thoughts collided in her mind. What if she had miscalculated? What if Bill's skepticism was the tipping point that unraveled the fragile enthusiasm in the room? Watching him, Eve noted the slight crease forming between his brows and wondered if it mirrored her own internal conflict. In that moment, she understood that fostering change wasn't merely about the right message, it also required courage to confront her fears, confront Bill, and ultimately, confront herself. "Let us consider this a moment for potential," she pressed on, straining to maintain control. "If we allocate time for innovative thinking today, doesn't that save us countless hours of reactive problem-solving tomorrow?" The words poured out as instinctively as breathing, but fear lurked behind them, gnawing at her confidence. Pieces of her well-prepared narrative were flinging apart in the wake of raw emotion. Bill shifted slightly, and Eve seized on the development. She reminded herself that he was likely wrestling with the same internal war, doubt and fear on one side, opportunity and innovation on the other. We all have department goals tied to this. But what if we could expand those goals by leveraging each other's strengths? Together, we can build a strategy powerful enough to minimize risk and maximize creativity. Across the table, Maria nodded, visibly encouraged, urging others to engage. Yet the atmosphere remained charged, and Eve realized she needed to draw Bill into the conversation specifically. "Bill, you have the insight on resource allocation. Couldn't this lean experimentation lead us to highly efficient solutions?" His fingers drummed softly against the polished table, a tell she had learned indicated his contemplation. The attention in the room sagged toward him, reverberations of the debate still echoing off the walls. She had to project even more positivity, more reassurance, even as uncertainty knotted in her stomach. Predictable paths aren't necessarily safe, she continued, her voice growing steadier with each passing second. In our rapidly changing industry, playing it safe can be the riskiest move of all. The statement hung in the air, daring him, challenging him. At last, Bill uncrossed his arms, shifting his gaze toward her. And if this leads to consequences we can't manage? He queried, the icy barrier around his skepticism not entirely thawed. The question wasn't only about the workshop, it was a direct line into the heart of leadership and accountability, a confrontation Eve found herself compelled to embrace. I believe our department can handle discomfort in order to inspire a culture of risk-taking. Let us redefine our constraints and empower the team to push beyond them. Mistakes will happen, yes, but they will be our building blocks, not our crutches. Eve felt the hint of passion flare as she spoke, momentum gathering behind her words. Bill's brow furrowed deeper, and Eve couldn't tell if it meant he was still digesting her points or solidifying his resistance. You sound so sure, he remarked softly, almost begrudgingly. What if this monumental shift is more than we bargained for? Then we adapt, she countered with conviction. That's the essence of transformation, Bill. Embracing the unknown is our only path to resilience. The room mirrored her pulse, a collective breath awaiting the conclusion, and she dared to see the intrigue flicker across Bill's face. For a moment, it felt as if the universe had paused, balancing on the edge of a decision that could redefine them all. Could Eve genuinely pivot the culture of the workplace with this one confrontation? As the hum of whispered discussions began to swell around them, Eve knew this was an inflection moment not only for the project, but for her professional journey. She had faced her dragons, engaged in battle, and stirred hope within the hearts of her peers, yet a seed of doubt lingered, whispering unanswered questions into the growing anticipation. Had she truly won the discussion, or had she only begun? And even if she managed to spark a collective shift today, would she have the strength to keep it alight amid the inevitable pushback that awaited? Would she be poised to transcend beyond the walls of her current capabilities just when they most needed her? As conversations began to blossom around the table, Eve realized it was time to step beyond the threshold of her own fears. But a steely glance from Bill hinted at a deeper assessment yet to be voiced. With storm clouds still swirling overhead, she understood this confrontation had merely ignited the battle. What would it take to emerge victorious when the stakes kept escalating? Eve could feel the resonance of her own heartbeat as voices mingled in spirited debate. The air felt electric yet turbulent, an echo of her internal chaos reflected back at her. She had wrestled with her apprehensions, seized momentum with her words, yet here she stood, precariously balanced on the precipice of possibility and uncertainty. Bill's scrutiny lingered like a storm cloud overhead. She knew he was weighing her propositions against deep-seated beliefs forged in traditional practices, a mental fortress around his conservative approach. What made her any more equipped to lead this change? Was she merely a catalyst for chaos? Her thoughts spiraled as she paced, scanning the room. Focus, Eve, she reminded herself. This is about collaboration, not confrontation. Yet, she couldn't deny the thrill of the discord that stirred in her. The fire of resistance ignited her determination, urging her to find clarity amid the clashing perspectives. She felt more than just an employee in that moment, she felt like a leader shaped by every experience that led her to this turning point. Can I share a few thoughts? Maria's voice pulled Eve from her reverie. Eve is right about the need for innovation, but we have to consider the risks as well. Eve shifted her perspective, embracing this opening. Absolutely, Maria. Let's talk about those risks. Knowledge is power, right? She saw Bill's posture relax slightly, a crack in his fortress. If we can identify potential pitfalls now, we can plan precursors or contingencies. After all, what is the worst that could happen? The shift in the conversation recalibrated the room. Engaged nods and murmurs of agreement began to ripple across the table. It wasn't just her voice, it was power in numbers, collective intelligence that defied Bill's singular worldview. Eve dared to challenge herself further, thinking of ways to empower her colleagues to contribute more actively. What if we break into small focus groups? She proposed, excitement washing over her as she envisioned the collaborative potential. Each group could tackle specific risks and propose solutions alongside their innovative ideas. That way, we bind creativity with accountability. A wave of anticipation washed over her. Olivia, an ardent skeptic, raised her hand. But those groups need guidance. Who will ensure we don't go off track? Eve felt her confidence flicker in response to the skepticism. That's a valid point. I'm happy to facilitate, but I also believe we should have rotating members lead discussions each week. It's key to develop leadership skills within our team. We need multiple perspectives steering this ship. Her heart raced as she spoke, words flowing with an urgency propelled by a deep-seated desire to unlock untapped potential within herself and her team. Could she genuinely be that transformative leader, or were these mere nameless aspirations wrapped in a facade of bravado? Sounds risky, Bill interjected, but the edge in his voice had dulled, instead hinting at curiosity. What if they lead us in circles instead of forward? In theory, Bill, that's precisely why we're anticipating the roadmap to emerge from uncertainty. Discomfort is a myth. The real challenge lies in believing and advancing from a space of risk and exploration. If we do nothing, we remain static, entrapped in our established mediocrity. If we stumble, that's a chance to learn and solidify our resilience. The resolve that soaked through her words surprised even Eve. She could dissect the apprehensions and resistances with clarity, yet could she hold this presence? Could she pivot her doubts into strengths for the team to rally behind? Shifting roles, she made it clear that she wasn't just heralding change, she demanded her team leap alongside her into the unknown. Yet an underlying fear still gripped her. Was she up for challenging her limitations? As the group began to vocalize more ideas, she caught Bill's contemplative gaze. The hesitations flickered but remained, a residual testament to the push and pull of leadership, with an intensity that sent ripples through the air. Again, she caught herself deflecting her gaze elsewhere, unwilling to confront the source of doubts that pulsed through her veins. Eve, he called, his voice imbued with unresolved challenges. Even if your vision inspires action, how will you sustain this shift when inevitable resistance arises? The question sliced through her like a stake, demanding her full attention. Eve inhaled deeply, recognizing that her answer loomed larger than the room or even the project. It demanded a reckoning with her deepest fears, the question that spoke directly to the crux of her journey. What if she had the strength to not only confront external resistance but also to wrestle with her own burgeoning identity as a leader? In that heartbeat of clarity, she realized this wasn't merely a workshop, it was the genesis of who she could become. The crowd buzzed, but in that chaos, clarity beckoned. The ongoing discussion wasn't merely strategic, it was bigger. It was about her evolution into the leader she aspired to be. She took a step forward, committing to this path, riding the wave of anticipation and trepidation. Could she transform not just the team but herself in the process? All she knew was that her answer lay on the horizon, a dawning revelation that could either buoy or sink her, for Eve had unlocked something monumental. She stood at the nexus of possibility and her deepest fears. The next moment could shatter her doubts or strengthen her resolve. The question reverberated: what transformation awaited her in the face of Bill's looming skepticism? Eve felt a surge of energy cascading through her, igniting her resolve to conquer the unsettling fear Bill's challenge stirred within her. As she took stock of the room, faces turned towards her, expectant yet unsure, she recognized an unfamiliar feeling creeping in: assertiveness. The air resonated with tension, but this time it wasn't just her anxiety, it was the potential energy of innovation waiting to unfurl. Great questions often lead to greater insights, she said, embracing the spotlight thrust upon her. The goal isn't to eliminate resistance but to recognize it as part of the journey. We will face challenges, yes, but that's where growth happens. Eve noticed hints of agreement from some colleagues, but a flicker of doubt still shimmered in Bill's keen gaze. His critiques were the antithesis of her idealism, yet at that moment, it felt invigorating. The friction was fertile ground for creative ideas. Let us tackle resistance head-on, she continued, reveling in the power her voice commanded. Next week, I'll lead a session focused on identifying our key areas of concern regarding this project. We'll dive deep and expose the reservations. Let us not shy away from differing opinions but rather reshape them into pathways toward our goal. The room buzzed, and she could feel the hesitation slowly eroding. Maybe she wasn't just pushing the envelope, she was unearthing layers of potential buried under years of tradition. The idea of engaging in a dialogue rather than a directive seemed more tenable now, a chance to elevate every voice, including her own. More thoughts flooded her mind. Eve found herself stepping beyond her self-imposed limitations, exploring the contours of her leadership style. Each word spoken made her more acutely aware of her instincts, her motivations. She'd been held back not only by external judgments but by her own fear of failure, the very fear that had kept her tethered to comfortable roles instead of embracing the unpredictable terrain of growth. Moreover, she said, daring to extend her reach, after our initial discussions, I'd like to implement a mentorship circle. Each week, we'll rotate lead discussions and critique sessions not just for accountability but to nurture our skills and build trust within our team. She met Bill's gaze steadily as she added, it empowers every individual, spreading the weight of leadership equally. And yes, there will be slip-ups. Through crises, we'll learn adaptability. The shift in dynamics felt palpable. Nods multiplied, hands raised with questions, feedback exchanged. Each vibrant interaction invigorated Eve. When had she ever felt so aligned with her purpose? The empowerment that bloomed within her was a reflection of the blossoming energy in the room. Yet, as she basked in this wave of enthusiasm, a voracious gnawing persisted in her gut. The deeper she dove into leadership, the more formidable her fears loomed. Could she genuinely foster such a transparent environment? What if vulnerability exposed weaknesses instead of strengths? An unwavering pulse of resolve surfaced. This was not just about delegating roles, it was about crafting a robust support system. Members of her team needed to know their voices mattered, something she struggled to acknowledge in her journey thus far. This project, with its inherent unpredictability, was also an opportunity to evolve her understanding of failure and success. Eve, Maria chimed in, her enthusiasm sparking excitement that rang through the room. Your approach is refreshing, but how do we ensure that everyone is on board with this shift? We'll maintain open channels for communication, Eve responded, her heart pounding as she made a commitment to her colleagues. Our success hinges on collaboration. If anyone feels lost or unable to contribute, let us create pathways to address those barriers together. She felt a slight tremor in her voice, the power of her convictions outweighed it. This moment could solidify her standing as a leader, but it could also lead to unexpected challenges. The push-pull between leading with confidence and embracing a struggle with vulnerability was alive, intensifying the already charged atmosphere. When Bill raised his hand again, a mix of skepticism and intrigue splashed across his features. One last question, Eve. If mentoring and openness only lead us back into chaos, how will you manage the fallout on your shoulders? Leadership isn't just about championing ideas. I embrace the fallout, Bill, she affirmed, her voice steady but laced with urgency. Not as a burden but as an opportunity for clarity and growth. If we falter, I promise to stand up with everyone and adapt. True leadership lies in resilience, and that what we're here to cultivate. As the murmurs of the room evolved into discerning consideration and tentative enthusiasm, Eve didn't need to see Bill's face to feel a shift. The uncertainty clouding her path remained, but the inkling of mastery over her fears began to ripple through her sense of commitment. She was determined to honor her own evolving definition of leadership, yet it thrived on the compliance of her team. In the swirling dynamics of innovation and trepidation, Eve was preparing to face something greater, the indelible tension between risk and stability. Would she fully embrace the unpredictability of leadership and risk resistance from her team, or would she find herself tethered to her old ways, the answer danced just beyond reach, existing in the space where fear met courage. Underneath the exhilaration, something deeper loomed like a door slightly ajar, beckoning her curiosity and dread. What crucial revelation would she encounter in her quest to not just lead but truly connect with her team in the face of inevitable resistance? Eve stood on the precipice of her new reality, her heart racing with the culmination of her journey. The initial doubts that once plagued her were beginning to dissipate, replaced by a resurging clarity that propelled her forward. This was not merely about securing a place at the table, it was about embracing her right to lead with conviction, with authenticity. In the days following her presentation, the workshop she proposed unfolded with remarkable success. It wasn't solely the concepts that materialized but a shared commitment to venture into the realms of creativity and vulnerability. The team, once resistant to change, began to flourish in a new environment where ideas flowed freely, and differing opinions became cornerstones for innovation rather than obstacles. Eve felt a profound sense of achievement as she witnessed this transformation. The initial skepticism from her colleagues, particularly Bill, gradually shifted to curiosity and collaboration. What had been a battlefield of opposing views turned into a collaborative space filled with enthusiasm. Each session sparked deeper conversations, and her colleagues' hearts began to align with her vision. Her confidence blossomed further with every successful interaction, and she approached her role as a facilitator with unyielded determination. No longer was she the timid ghost lingering in the background, she had stepped into her power, wielding it like the mighty dragon she had once admired. Holding herself accountable to the promises she made, she engaged with the team and provided clear channels of communication that empowered everyone to voice their concerns and ideas. The true test arrived when Bill, who had once questioned every bold move, approached her with a blend of respect and challenge. "Eve," he said, inching forward, "I underestimated the impact this approach has had on our team. I realize now that the essence of innovation we fostered is exactly what we need to thrive in our sector. Can we roll it out company-wide?" Eve met his gaze steadily, feeling a wave of pride wash over her. This was validation not just from a colleague but from her own journey of self-discovery. "Absolutely, Bill. Let us take the next steps together. I'd love to work with you to expand this initiative." The satisfaction of this moment hit her deeply, marking a significant milestone in her evolution from waitress to a trusted collaborator, an innovator. With renewed resolve, Eve began to draft the framework for a broader company initiative derived from their workshops. She outlined a strategy that incorporated the lessons learned: collaboration, vulnerability, and adaptability. As she designed the structure, she recognized how far she had come. Each element showcased her leadership growth, embodying the spirit of the dragon she once yearned to emulate. Through these experiences, Eve had not only embraced her individual strengths but had woven them into the fabric of her professional environment. Her colleagues began to rely on her insights and facilitation skills, recognizing the profound shifts she had initiated. She tackled challenges with a newfound competence, proving that fear could indeed transform into strength. In a culmination that felt both exhilarating and surreal, the company announced a new mission statement built on the principles Eve had presented, emphasizing a culture of creativity and risk-taking. As she stood before her colleagues during the presentation of this significant change, her heart swelled with pride. She no longer felt invisible. She had carved a respected position grounded in her values and the unique narrative she had embraced. As applause echoed around her, it dawned on her that she had indeed become the fierce protector of her legacy. Eve had conquered the dragons of doubt, both within herself and in her workplace. This journey illuminated her path forward, a path defined not just by professional achievements, but by a deeper understanding of her capability to inspire transformation in others. With a profound sense of fulfillment, Eve reflected on the initial uncertainties of her journey. She had not only found her voice but had turned it into a rallying cry for others to follow suit. This was more than just a professional triumph, it was an assertion of her identity. She was now equipped with a clear purpose, a strategic vision, and an unwavering determination to continue flying high, just like the dragons of lore. To the audience seeking inspiration, take this turning point in Eve's journey as a cue for your own transformations. The time is now to harness your inner strength, challenge the status quo, and inspire change in your environment. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Believe us, it makes all the difference. Comment below your reactions and theories about Eve's incredible journey. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second. Join us.